Hi.
Hi, I have a question about the function of the spleen and the small intestine in Chinese medicine.
Way harder than that. Okay, function of the spleen in stomach and small intestine.
Yeah. Well, actually, the spleen itself, because the spleen energy goes upward. And to interact with the lung and bringing the nutrients up, and then, but they say that it's extracting the nutrients from the food, but then they also say that about small intestine, and so I kind of have some ideas about what that's about, but I just wanted a clarification.
Okay. Well, I think that the first thing I would say about that is I don't necessarily think I can give you a clarification because I don't really agree with the distinction in the way that it's kind of made, where, if we talk about the spleen in Chinese medicine, we sort of make this distinction as if that's different than the small intestine. And it's really kind of obvious to me that it's not. So, this is not, maybe this might not be a TCM, breakdown of this, but it's my breakdown of it, right? So, what I would say is that the lining of the small intestine, the lumen of the small intestine, first of all, the lumen of the small intestine, we know from Western physiology and so on, is where you're actually absorbing your nutrients primarily. I mean, some in the stomach, but fundamentally, mainly the small intestine, a little bit in the large intestine, probably 90% of whatever, small intestine. So when we're thinking about spleen stomach function, we're thinking about digestion, right? And where does digestion actually take place? Not in your anatomical spleen, not even actually in any particular relationship to your anatomical spleen, right? We know digestion happens in your small intestine. So it's so important to emphasize that when we're talking about organs in Chinese medicine, we are talking about organ systems, right? It may or may not overlap what the actual anatomical physiological organ is doing, right? In this case, there's not that much overlap between the anatomical spleen and the TCM spleen function, right? So that suggests that when the originators of Chinese medicine were involved with dissection, they could see where the spleen was, right? And they knew in some way that there was a lot of stuff over here going on with digestion, because you've got your stomach on the left, you've got your spleen on the left. You also have your pancreas on the left. So obviously, when we talk about spleen in Chinese medicine, we're fundamentally talking about pancreas. There are some other functions that are, because again, these are organ systems, right? They might overlap multiple different physiological processes and other anatomical organs, right? So, what about the small intestine actually sort of resonates with anything we think of about the spleen? Well, firstly, we think of the spleen as earth, right? The element of the earth in most sort of conceptions of the 5 elements is central, right in the middle. And then you have metal and wood contending with each other, fire and water kind of balancing, contesting each other, and earth is kind of holding this middle space. And when we think about the arrangement of the body, it's pretty obvious that central in this context is sort of around the navel. Could be a bit above it, could be a bit below it, to either side of it. But this is where you get that sort of foundational center of the body, like in terms of, from above to below, where are you going to meet in the middle? From the sides, where are you going to meet in the middle? Oh, it's all around your navel region, right? This is the earth energy center of the body. And if you look at all the different belly palpation systems, be they Japanese, Chinese, Korean, or whatever, earth energy right here. So here's where your spleen actually is, right, your TCM spleen. And we think of the spleen as a tie-in organ, just the same way we think of the lung as a tie-in organ. So one of the features of tie-in, and I don't see this really emphasized very much, but the feature of tie-in and tie-yang that they both have in common, as is outlined in like chapter 5 or 6 or whatever of the Ling Shu, is that both the tie-in and the tie-yang are opening, right? So the tai-yang being, your bladder channel, sort of like having to do with the external surface protection of your body, the tai-yang opens to the outside, right? And therefore to the climactic, wind and all that kind of stuff. And that's why we see this understanding that when you're getting wind invasion, you're most likely to feel it first in that tai-yang zone because it's opening to the outside. And we can see evidence of that in the fact that the bladder channel covers the largest sort of square footage of the body.
And small intestine is also...
Throw small intestine in there too.
Tai-yang.
Right.
How's that opening to the outside?
Well, on a channel level, it's the same.
Yeah.
Small intestine channel, bladder channel is all kind of an opening to the outside. Let me dive back into tai-yin. So the function of tai-yin is opening to the inside, or what would opening to the inside look like? Well, the body clearly demonstrates this in both the lung and the spleen, because with the lung you've got these divisions. You're going from your bronchi to your bronchioles to your tiny little bronchioles to your alveoli, and I think there's like 6 or 7 mathematical divisions, such that you have 300 million alveoli. And so therefore, even though your lungs might only fill a volume of whatever, a couple square feet or something, the surface area is increasing and increasing and increasing as you get these increasing divisions. So it's opening inwards till you get a massive surface area in your lungs for oxygen exchange. And I know that people talk about that surface area being like size of a baseball field, and it's sort of, there's all these kind of interesting kind of ways of analyzing that. It's no different with the lining of the small intestine. That's where we see that same tie-in process, because you've got the villi, and then you've got the microvilli, and then you've got the little microvilli over those villi, and you've got this opening inwards. Firstly, even in the fact that the tubes of the small intestine all start to kind of like wrap and wrap and wrap, and then all the lining of those tubes of your small intestine is going through these multiple divisions to increase the surface area again. And again, the surface area of the small intestine is like this massive surface area.
But yet it's tai-yang.
The small intestine is tai-yang, but the spleen is tai-yin.
Right? You were just talking about the tai-yang.
Yeah,
I'm
talking about the tai-yin.
The small intestine.
I'm talking about the tai-yin. I'm talking about the lung and spleen tai-yin. What is tai-yin? Tai-yin is opening inwards, right? Where do you see that in the body? You see it in the lung. You see it in the small intestine, right?
Which is spleen.
Yeah, the lining of the small intestine is the spleen. Evidence, the spleen is, apart from that's where your digestion actually happens, which is pretty good evidence. You've got this energetic patterning with the lung and the spleen of opening inwards. Do you follow it?
Mm-hmm.
The massive surface area.
We're calling it spleen, but it's actually, the function is the spleen function, but it's actually small intestine. But there's also small intestine function in Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
That's separating the pure from the turbid.
Yeah, what do you think the spleen's doing?
So they're...
that's what the spleen's doing.
It's the same.
See how confused TCM is in this regard?
But when I was reading about the function of the spleen, it says it goes up and intermixes with the...
Let me backtrack. Let's backtrack from that statement, and let's kind of get to that, right? The basic function of digestion is that you take food in, and then you split the food apart, right? You break it up, and we know that function is undertaken through the sort of peristaltic action of chewing, and then the peristaltic action, and then the action of the stomach acids that start to kind of break things apart. And then once the food is excreted into the small intestine, and then you get the bile, so you've got this very, very, very acidic function, which is breaking things apart the way acids do. And then you've got this very alkaline function that is emulsifying and doing other stuff that, what bile does at the beginning of the small intestine. So that by the time the food's in the small intestine, you are going to separate the pure from the impure, right? You're going to decide what you want to make you, right? And you're going to absorb that into your body, and it's going to go through the hepatic portal circulation, and it's going to get, you're going to get the engine of your body that turns things into you is going to get on with it. And that which you don't really think should be you is going to get kind of passed on. Maybe there's a few nutrients more that'll get taken out of it. Maybe the water will get extracted out of it by the large intestine, but not too much. Maybe it'll be admixed with bacterial fermentation, which is also a big deal. But that basic function of separating the pure from the impure, that is what the spleen is doing. It's occurring inside your small intestine, right? Because your small intestine is your spleen. The lining of your small intestine is your spleen.
Then what does the pancreas do?
Well, the pancreas is producing the enzymes. Yeah, you could think of those enzymes as like a fire quality, right? Pancreas has two functions, right? You've got your endocrine pancreas, you've got your exocrine pancreas, right? Mm-hmm. So the exocrine pancreas is producing enzymes which, in the alkalinized environment of the duodenum, the beginning of the small intestine, can then actually go in and split apart the proteins into amino acids, split apart the fats into essential fatty acids, split apart the carbohydrates into disaccharides and monosaccharides. So this splitting apart function is sort of the essence of your capacity to then absorb stuff, right? So that's I would say that's somewhat of a fiery function in my sort of way of thinking. I could be wrong in that element designation of that, but that's my sense about it, right? Because it's a breaking apart of things. Right?
So then why is small intestine called a fire channel, or designated fire?
Well, because that's where it's happening. It's not happening in your pancreas. Your pancreas is, the same way your fat is not being emulsified in your liver, right? The bile is emulsifying your fat in your small intestine, right? It's produced by the liver, right?
And it creates heat.
What am I going to say? But in the same way, whilst your pancreas may be producing the enzymes are not acting in your pancreas. Unless you have acute pancreatitis, you really don't want them to be acting in your pancreas. You want them to be acting, boom, right in your small intestine. And that, I would argue, between the very, very cold nature of bile and I would argue the rather hot nature of the spleen yang, right, which is the pancreatic juices, and then you get the kind of admixing of the two, and you got digestion happening.
Okay, so then why do they say that the energy of the spleen is going upward?
Thank you. So, my argument is that the tie-in aspect of the spleen is the lumen of the small intestine. So this is the part of the small intestine that can then absorb those broken down, amino acids, saccharides and fatty acids and so on. And that, according to Chinese medical thinking, the essence of that, which is then extracted out, the gu qi or the shui gu qi, is then passed up towards the lung and the heart, where the lung brings in the gen qi, it's the air qi, that comes in and admixes with the qi of the food, and then that also admixes with a certain type of qi of the blood, right? And at that point, you're not dealing with substances anymore. The actual substances, as we could sort of now know from Western anatomy and physiology, are going into your hepatic portal circulation and going through your liver and getting, the factory of your liver is working with all those food components and creating the different sort of biochemistries that your body needs, spreading it through your body. But the energy, the qi extracted from the food is passed upwards to meet the qi extracted from the air, to meet the kind of little sort of fire spark of qi in your blood, and then that's what's actually generating this sort of fundamental qi of your channels. That's TCM theory. don't know that I have anything to sort of say about that. I'm not sure I believe it, but that's TCM theory.
Does it also help with the Wei Qi or creating Wei Qi or?
Well, there's two different sort of ideas in Chinese medicine about Wei Qi. There's a more dominant idea that the Wei Qi is produced by the more coarse aspect of the Qi extraction from your food, right? And whereas the sort of nutrients that go into and feed your blood and so on are a finer aspect. And so that more coarse aspect then creates the more coarse aspect of your Qi field, which is the Wei Qi aspect, which has a much more dense and much more coarse kind of quality to it. There's another idea about the production of Wei Qi, which is a sort of more minority view, which is that the Wei Qi is actually produced also in your, maybe also or maybe exclusively, I'm not even sure, through the action of your lower dantian interacting with your large intestine, and that's also producing a kind of a Wei Qi field. The only person I know who's written about that is Bob Floors, who wrote a book called Scotology and the Gate of Life, where he kind of gets into that kind of theory. Let's go back to the pancreas, okay? The pancreas is emblematic of the spleen, we think. It's part of the whole TCM spleen thinking. Pancreas has these two functions, the exocrine pancreas, which we sort of talked about, producing the enzymes, which are then taking their action, their place of action is here. But it's also got the endocrine pancreas, right? And that's producing, insulin. Mm-hmm. And how is that related to spleen function? Well, if we think of spleen as earth, and then if we think of spleen as everything to do with nourishment, which we do in Chinese medicine, we think of the mouth as spleen, and the process of, chewing and swallowing, and the process of, the stomach, and the digestive process. It's all has to do with nourishment, right? But then there's a further step to that, which is that basically insulin tells your cell wall, and the brain of the cell is in the cell wall, and so it's kind of communicating with the cell wall to open its little channel gate pathways so that the glucose can actually go into the cell and feed into the cell. So if you think about that in a slightly more symbolic or abstract way, it's a little bit like the next step, right? You eat the food, you burn it and you split it apart and do all that stuff with it, the cold energy of the bile, the hot energy of the pancreatic enzymes, and then somehow the holding energy, the earth energy in the middle that kind of enables the absorption through the lumen of your small intestine. But then, as it's going through blood circulation and through processing, which definitely is also quite connected with the liver, then how's your body actually going to absorb it? The original name for diabetes in Chinese medicine is wasting and thirsting disease, because we know that if diabetes is untreated, the person's thirsty all the time and they're hungry all the time. They're hungry all the time because those cells can't, the mouth can't open. So my way of thinking, that endocrine function of the pancreas is kind of a mothering function. And I would then say that the exocrine function of the pancreas looks to me a little bit more like a father type of function. This could be bullshit actually, but it's just the way I think about it or feel into it. That they're very different functions, and I think they sort of express a very different energy. And obviously, that which enables your cells to absorb nutrients would be part of that earth energy of nourishment, right? This sort of seems obviously connected to me. So I can sort of see how the pancreas, both of its functions, are very central to the sort of earth energy conception of Chinese thinking about the spleen.
That's really cool. And how does small intestine and heart functionally relate?
Oh, in terms of why the channels paired? you know, like one thing I would say about that is when you read the Neijing, that's the Ling Shu. When you read the Neijing, they're not really trying to squeeze 11 organs into a 12-fold system until you get to the second half of the Neijing, the Ling Shu, right? Once you get to the Ling Shu, you have to reconcile. We've got a 12-channel system, but we only have an 11-organ system, right? Wu Zhang Liu Fu, we've got 5 Zhang and 6 Fu. So how they all got hooked up, and if that corresponds to how that corresponds to any sort of reality, I don't think I have an answer for that. Actually, like if you look at the 12-channel system, the place where it seems to sort of be hardest to reconcile with actually physically what's going on with the body is in the 3 young arm channels, right? Because you've got large intestine, small intestine. Well, triple bone, let's just put it to one side for a minute, but with like large intestine and small intestine, you look at the external course of the large intestine channel, it's like, that's quite far away from my butthole, from my colon. It's like, that's quite far away, right? But then, there's the internal branch that goes down. Similarly, the small intestine channel, it's like, well, okay, we've got our external branch, and then we've got the internal branches going down. So your question was why are heart and small intestine paired?
Like emotionally.
Yeah. Well, they're yin. Well, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Why large intestine and lung paired? I don't know. It seems to be right. Once you work with the system for 34 years, it seems like you just see over and over again every day. You're gonna see these overlaps all the time. Like yesterday. I think you weren't here, but I treated a patient who was having pain around his heart 3 area for about a year, actually, on and off for a year. And so we started to palpate, and I couldn't really find much wrong with his heart channel. But he also had pain bilaterally, right at both small intestine 4 back shoe points, right around bladder 27, right around the PSIS zone. And he also had pain. Where was his other pain? Oh, it was right at this CV9 area, which in Japanese thinking is also considered to be a front root point for the small intestine. So, there was the channel, and then there were these associated organ issues, and then digging deeper into his history, he'd had his gallbladder removed a couple of years previously. His digestion hadn't quite been okay. In other words, if you take out somebody's gallbladder, their small intestine function is not going to be as great, because the gallbladder is storing 50% of the bile that your body produces. Your body produces between 1 and 2 liters a day of bile. Half of it typically is going to be sequestered by the gallbladder and then released in response to the cholecystokinin output of your stomach from fatty food, right? That's no longer happening for him. So the small intestine's not getting that rhythmical pulsation and instruction or maybe it's getting the instruction, doesn't have the ability to release the bile in a kind of a flood, which so some basic, fairly fundamental aspect of what would support his normal small intestine function is missing, right? Potentially missing, or at least degraded, 50% degraded. Where was I going with that? So in clinical practice, like how is small intestine related to heart? I don't know, but you do see these overlaps quite often, a lot actually. Especially when you start looking at channels and you start listening to people's medical history, looking at pulses, you'll see there's a relationship. I can't really explain that relationship to you, but here's an attempt actually. Here's one attempt. So the front moo point of the small intestine in TCM is CV4. Now a lot of people have a problem with that because that's not really where your small intestine. There's probably a bit of your small intestine down there, but most of it's up here. It looks like it's just kind of hanging around and what the fascia is doing, but most of it's actually kind of higher than that, right? why do we put the front molar of the small intestine down there? Well, what do we know about CV4, Guan Yuan? Well, we know that Guan Yuan is somewhere between like CV4 and CV6, that zone, is kind of the place where the fire energy of the lower dantian is kind of anchored, right? That sits kind of there. We know that the heart is an expression of the fire energy of your middle dantian, right? Now think about the heart and small intestine channels. Where do they go to? Well, the small intestine channel goes to the inner corner of the eyes, right? The heart channel is also thought in some traditions to actually also be connected to the inner canthus. And so when you look at, you read the eye, that's where you read heart, small intestine, right? Small intestine channel comes from, goes like, what is that? 18 upwards, and then meets with the bladder channel, right? Mm. So what is the fire energy there connected to small intestine and heart channel? Well, that's light, right? Fire, warmth, light. That's it's the fire goes. There's 3 transmutations in the 3 dantian. So in another way that you could see heart and small intestine might be related, well, they're related in the sense that the yin and yang pairings of the channels, like heart, small intestine, or lung, large intestine, express an inner-outer kind of quality, right? So heart is the inmost, the shaoyan, the most hidden. The small intestine on the channel level, like the bladder channel, is the outermost, the most external. So maybe there's a way that they're linked. I don't know. There's so much about the Chinese medicine system that I don't understand. I'm sure there's better explanations or people who do understand it, but I'm a little leery of just kind of repeating stuff that I don't really believe or don't have like in my own internal kind of frame of reference for, I would say. So I don't think I can quite answer the question of why are small intestine and heart linked, except the fire thing, the channel thing. I don't know. Could you design a medical system where you link heart and large intestine? Nah, not as easily. They're really different energies.
About frequent urination and the small intestine sending.
Let's talk about that. That's okay. I'll get to that. Let's cover. That's a little idea that sometimes you see in TCM diagnostics, right? Where if somebody has kind of like heart fire, typically when somebody has heart fire, that heart fire may express an imbalance between heart and kidney, because kidney is foundationally water, heart is foundationally fire. So when heart fire is blazing, it could be because kidney qi is deficient, right? Or because there isn't a loop going on that can balance out and connect them. So when heart fire is excess blazing, that heart fire can actually travel downwards to the small intestine, because the channels are yin and yang related, the organs are yin and yang related, and from a sort of a 3 dantian qigong type model, well, it would make sense. If you've got too much fire here, it could travel downwards. Now, there's also a relationship between the urethra, the heart, and the breasts, and the lips, right, and the tongue, right? And this relationship also has to do with the movement of fire energy. So if somebody has an excess heart fire thing, that heart energy could travel downwards to the vaginal region. So quite often we would see expressions of heat in the vaginal area, or it can travel down to small intestine and then to bladder through the channel interrelationships. And then you're going to see, maybe the person gets a bladder infection, or, something like a bladder infection. So, oftentimes what you'll notice if people have a bladder infection is that the emotional component of that is not that far under the surface, right? Similarly, with any kind of vaginal heat expression, you may not have to look very far to see a connection to the heart chi itself. Having said that, that's like that's a pathway of energy transfer that is described in the TCM literature, and sometimes you're going to see it, but it's not like a major thing. More questions?
I got it. That's it.
How much more time do we have?
About 5 minutes.
All right, let me just think if there's anything else I want to say. So what was your basic question? Because I probably didn't answer it.
No, I think you did.
What was it?
Well, it was just the talking about the functionality of small intestine and spleen and
let's just let me just have a little bit more think about function of the spleen. One of the functions of the spleen that I think is important in TCM is the idea that when the spleen is not functioning well, you're going to get damp, right? There's going to be sort of a damp quality to the pulses, damp quality to the tissues, swollen legs and ankles, and so on, fuzzy brain thinking. So the mental attribute associated with the spleen is the E, and the E is actually sort of an ability to think in an even, clear way. And our idea about the spleen is that the spleen actually can kind of metabolize damp and phlegm in the body. That's why, for example, when you look at a baby, they're producing mucus and phlegm all the time, and what we say about that in TCM is that their spleen is not yet mature, right? So, of course, you've met plenty of adults that are continuously producing mucus and phlegm. And one of the things that we would think about that is the spleen is actually not able to kind of metabolize that phlegmy, sticky, wet, damp stuff. Quite literally, actually. Sometimes with those kind of conditions, if you give the person pancreatic enzymes to take, you'll often see a considerable improvement in that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Pancreatic enzymes, or vegetarian digestive type enzymes or proteolytic enzymes, are really remarkable for clearing that phlegmy, damp, sticky, stuck energy from people. And frankly, that's an energy that is absolutely prevalent in cancer, many cancer cases. Most cancer cases, you're going to see that. And we know that proteolytic enzymes are really helpful for breaking down tumors and cysts and cancers and benign or malignant kind of lumps. So that's one thing about the spleen that I think I just wanted to mention. Just to think about spleen function when you see that sort of prevalence of damp.
So if there's more damp, then the spleen also wouldn't be able to exercise its holding function, and for the
holding function. Okay, so there's another thought about the spleen in Chinese medicine is that the spleen pulls upwards, right? It kind of has an upward pulling. It ascends the clear yang qi in order to kind of mix with the air qi and the blood qi and produce your sort of general good qi. And in that thinking, the spleen actually sort of can pull up on the organs. It has an ascending function.
And the muscles too, right? Keeping the muscles.
Thank you, yeah. So we see spleen associated with the flesh. Mm-hmm. And the flesh is sort of the more sort of fatty part of the muscle where you actually see the contraction expansion happening. It seems quite like a sort of spleen, more of a spleen type function, versus those sort of tendinous ligament components of the muscle fibers, which are would be more connected to the woods. So, once you're in Chinese medicine land, you will just see over and over again that when somebody has weak spleen function and a weak spleen pulse and so on, you're going to see the water retention. You're going to see a sort of puffy, flabby quality to the musculature, or if they have more of an earth type, an earth body type. There's just going to be, even if they're very, very strong, it could be a super powerful kind of martial arts master, but they'll still have that kind of layering of a kind of a little bit kind of spongy earth type tissue about them. So back to the idea of the spleen pulling up, right? So do I have anything really to say about that? No, except that, the up and down motion of spleen qi and stomach qi is really important in Chinese medical thinking. That the spleen is meant to pull up, and if it doesn't, then you'll see vaginal prolapse, you'll see uterine prolapse, you'll see inguinal hernias, but also you'll see the diarrhea. Right? The person can't, or the spleen energy can't hold it up. And so because the spleen is meant to be pulling up, and that is counterbalanced, but the stomach is meant to be pulling down. Right? So when the stomach's descending function is out of balance, you're going to see burping, belching, acid reflux, heartburn, nausea, vomiting. So we're looking to see, if those ascending, descending functions are in balance or not.
And we don't really need to know how it's happening in the body with the ascending spleen.
Yeah, well, I think that from a Western medical point of view, there's a tremendous amount that is not understood about energy. Well, maybe I shouldn't use the word energy so much as the tropism of energetic, movement. I mean, obviously, we've got a deep understanding of that in Chinese medicine, and it's incredibly helpful, right? Because we can flip around all kinds of conditions that Western medicine just kind of flails around with, because we've got this strong understanding. Certain organs have very specific movement patterns, and because they're organ systems, that can affect, so many different presentations in the body. So one thing about spleen and stomach that is interesting when you think about that ascending, descending function, to me, is that going back to that really ancient model of the 5 elements, which is that the earth is in the middle and the other 4 are sort of around them, right? So that middle energy, I would argue, sort of corresponds to the Qigong, fundamentally, and that's why when you look at the literature on the Qigong, one is you see that the Qigong is considered to have a sort of paired relationship with the stomach yang ming, as well as with the kidney. And another interesting thing to see is that the Qigong, the control point for the Qigong typically is spleen 4, right? On the spleen channel. And when you look at sort of TCM theory, you've got the Si Shen Song, right? You've got the 4 spirit points here around the central Bai Hui kind of thing. And even though in acupuncture theory we say that it's the liver channel that ascends to the top of the head, I would argue that it's the earth energy that runs right through the middle of the body, right? Now the earth energy is not trying to go up and not trying to go down, actually, in this sense. The earth energy is actually a central axial force that probably actually transcends movement, right? And that's why it's central to the 5 element sequence. Having said that, related to that sort of axial centrality, up and down is going to be highly, connected to that. Right? Spleen and stomach channels would be, very, very related to that. Okay, there's a lot more to say about the spleen, but we're out of time. So
Thank
thanks.
you, that was awesome.
No,
Appreciate that.
you are welcome.
That was